Welcome to the Threat Insight Analysis on the United States and Iran War. This video forms part of our new series, which aims to answer how society arrived at a particular situation at a specific moment in time. We call this series, How Did We Get Here? The United States and Iran War is the first topic in this series. You are welcome to contact us and submit ideas for other topics which you would like us to research and engage with. This video is the final part on the United States and Iran War and provides a look into the global economic, business, and security implication of the conflict. If you have not yet viewed the preceding videos on this topic, we strongly encourage you to do so and view them in sequence to ensure maximum benefit. The possible outcomes identified in the preceding forecast do not remain contained within Iran, Israel, or the Middle East. They transmit into the global economic environment through energy prices, shipping routes, insurance costs, investor confidence, defense spending, inflation expectations, sovereign borrowing costs, food prices, and social stability. The central economic risk is not only that the conflict may produce a temporary oil price shock, but that it may create a persistent uncertainty premium across the global economy. When companies, governments, insurers, lenders, and consumers begin to price geopolitical instability as a structural condition rather than a short-term crisis, growth slows, investment becomes more cautious, and the cost of resilience increases across almost every sector. The first transmission channel is energy. A wider or prolonged confrontation involving Iran immediately raises concern over the Strait of Hormuz, Gulf production infrastructure, tanker security, and energy flows into Asia, Europe, and Africa. Even where physical supply continues, the perception of risk increases freight rates, war risk insurance premiums, inventory costs, and hedging expenses. This translates into higher fuel prices, higher electricity generation costs in energy importing economies, higher transport costs, and higher input costs for agriculture, mining, manufacturing, logistics, construction, retail, and aviation. The World Bank's 2026 Global Outlook warns that the Middle East conflict has already driven sharp energy price increases, renewed inflationary pressure, and weaker growth prospects, with global growth projected at 2.5% in 2026 and a severe downside scenario in which deeper energy disruption and financial stress could pull global growth materially lower. The IMF's July 2026 update similarly frames the global economy as caught between the drag of war and the support of technology investment, with global growth projected at 3.0% in 2026 and headline inflation revised higher to 4.7%. The inflationary effect is especially dangerous because it is supply-driven rather than demand-driven. Central banks can cool excessive demand through interest rates, but they cannot reopen shipping lanes, rebuild damaged energy infrastructure, or remove geopolitical risk from commodity markets. This creates a stagflationary pressure pattern. Weaker growth combines with higher prices. In advanced economies, this may delay interest rate cuts, weaken consumer demand, and reduce corporate investment. In emerging markets and developing economies, the effect is more severe because households spend a larger share of income on food, fuel, and transport, while governments often have less fiscal room to absorb shocks through subsidies, tax relief, or social support. The result is a global environment in which inflation becomes politically destabilizing, even where headline growth remains positive. The second transmission channel is recession risk. A contained conflict may produce a temporary slowdown followed by partial recovery, but a prolonged conflict or repeated disruptions to energy and trade routes would weaken global demand, reduce investment, and increase the probability of recession in energy importing economies. The risk is not uniform. The United States may be cushioned by its energy production and technology sector, while parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa remain more exposed to imported energy and commodity price volatility. China and India may be affected through energy import costs and trade uncertainty, while commodity exporters may benefit from higher mineral or energy prices, but still suffer from weaker global demand and tighter financial conditions. The business world would therefore face a divided environment. Some firms gain from defense spending, energy substitution, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, and logistics rerouting, while consumer-facing, energy-intensive, debt-heavy, and import-dependent sectors face margin compression and weaker demand. The third transmission channel is food security. Higher oil and gas prices increase the cost of fertilizer, mechanized farming, cold storage, irrigation, packaging, and transport. If fertilizer prices rise materially, the impact moves from energy markets into food prices with a delay. Food inflation is one of the most politically sensitive forms of inflation because it directly affects household survival and public perception of government competence. In fragile economies, food and fuel price pressure can become a trigger for protest, labor unrest, community mobilization, xenophobic tension, criminal opportunism, and anti-government narratives. This is where the economic shock translates into a security threat. The risk is not only conventional terrorism, it is the convergence of economic grievance, ideological mobilization, organized crime, extremist propaganda, and opportunistic violence. The terrorism threat may rise through several pathways. First, Iran-aligned groups may target Western, Israeli, Gulf, or commercial interests if the conflict escalates, or if Iranian leadership requires retaliatory symbolism without direct state attribution. Second, extremist organizations not aligned to Iran may exploit the conflict narrative to recruit, radicalize, and justify attacks against perceived Western or Jewish-linked targets. Third, lone actor or small cell mobilization may increase where online propaganda merges with local grievances, economic stress, and identity-based anger. Fourth, maritime, energy, diplomatic, aviation, tourism, logistics, and financial targets become more attractive because they offer symbolic value and economic disruption. The more the conflict is framed globally as a civilizational or religious confrontation, the greater the risk that unrelated local actors appropriate the narrative for their own violent purposes. The social mobilization threat is broader than terrorism. Rising fuel, food, electricity, and transport costs can turn economic pressure into street-level mobilization. Protest movements may emerge around cost of living pressure, unemployment, corruption, foreign policy alignment, energy shortages, anti-war sentiment, perceived elite insulation, or anger at multinational companies. Labour unions may press for wage increases to compensate for inflation, while businesses may resist because margins are already under pressure. This can generate strike activity, service delivery protests, transport disruption, campus mobilization, political rallies, and community unrest. In highly unequal societies, inflation does not remain an economic variable. It becomes a legitimacy test. Regional instability will also spread beyond the Middle East. In North Africa, food and fuel price pressure can intensify existing fiscal and youth unemployment pressures. In Europe, higher energy costs, migration pressure, political polarization, anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim tensions, and pressure on defense budgets may strengthen extremist and populist movements. In Asia, energy importers may face weaker external balances, higher production costs, and pressure on manufacturing competitiveness. In Africa, the conflict may interact with debt distress, currency weakness, food insecurity, and already fragile governance environments. In Latin America, the immediate energy shock may be mixed, but financial market risk aversion and weaker global demand could reduce capital inflows and commodity demand. The conflict therefore becomes a global risk multiplier rather than a regional event. For the business world, the immediate implication is that resilience can no longer be treated as an operational add-on. It becomes a strategic cost of doing business. Companies will need to reassess energy exposure, supplier concentration, shipping routes, insurance coverage, cyber vulnerability, staff travel, executive security, site security, cash flow sensitivity, debt refinancing, and customer affordability. The risk profile is particularly acute for companies with operations in ports, logistics corridors, mining sites, energy infrastructure, retail centers, financial services, telecommunications, data centers, aviation, tourism, and high-footfall public environments. Business continuity planning must therefore move beyond facility-level disruption and include geopolitical escalation, cyber retaliation, commodity price shock, protest spillover, and rapid deterioration in public order. For South Africa, the implications are serious because the country is a net importer of refined fuel and remains highly exposed to global oil prices, exchange rate volatility, food inflation, and investor sentiment. Even where domestic inflation appears contained, an external oil and shipping shock can quickly move through petrol, diesel, public transport, freight, electricity generation, food prices, mining input costs, and household disposable income. South Africa's structural unemployment and inequality mean that a cost of living shock has a higher probability of translating into protest, labour mobilisation, political agitation, crime pressure, and community instability. The Parliamentary Budget Office has already highlighted geopolitical conflict, environmental crises, cost of living pressure, weakening trust, and social cohesion risks as part of the country's economic context, while private sector outlooks point to modest growth, weaker confidence, rising global pressures, and sector divergence. The mining sector may experience both opportunity and pressure. Higher geopolitical instability can increase demand for gold as a safe haven asset and strengthen the strategic importance of platinum group metals, manganese, chrome, coal, uranium, and critical minerals used in energy transition, defense, communications, and technology supply chains. However, higher diesel prices, explosives costs, equipment imports, insurance, security costs, wage pressure, logistics disruption, rail and port constraints, and community unrest can erode those gains. Mining operations are also exposed to labour mobilisation if inflation reduces real wages, and to illegal mining, theft, sabotage, and extortion if local economic stress increases around mine host communities. The opportunity is therefore not automatic commodity upside, it is disciplined positioning in strategic minerals while hardening logistics, energy resilience, labour relations, and site security. Agriculture is exposed through fuel, fertiliser, chemicals, packaging, cold chain logistics, export freight, insurance, and water energy dependencies. A sustained rise in oil and gas prices can lift fertiliser prices and reduce farm margins, especially for grain, fruit, livestock, and export-oriented producers. Food price increases may support some producers in nominal terms, but they also weaken consumer demand and increase the political sensitivity of food affordability. South Africa must therefore treat agriculture as both an economic sector and a stability sector. If food prices rise sharply while unemployment remains high, the risk of community unrest, theft, disruption to food logistics, and pressure on retailers increases. Agricultural resilience will require input cost hedging, fertiliser procurement planning, alternative energy, water security, cold chain protection, transport contingency planning, and close monitoring of rural security conditions. The communications and technology sector becomes more strategically important and more exposed. Telecommunications networks, data centers, undersea cable landing stations, cloud infrastructure, satellite links, payment systems, emergency communications, and media platforms become essential infrastructure during geopolitical stress. The threat environment includes cyber attack, disinformation, service disruption, cable sabotage, power instability, equipment supply delays, and protest-related damage to towers and fibre routes. If Iran-aligned or opportunistic cyber actors seek to impose costs on Western-aligned economies or multinational firms, South African subsidiaries, banks, telecoms, ports, energy firms, and government systems may become indirect targets. Communications companies should therefore strengthen cyber monitoring, physical protection of network assets, backup power, vendor risk management, crisis communication protocols, and coordination with national security structures. The security industry will face increased demand, but also increased operational complexity. Businesses, shopping centres, logistics operators, mines, farms, diplomatic sites, religious institutions, financial institutions, energy assets, and high-footfall public venues may require stronger risk assessments, access control, surveillance, incident response, protest monitoring, executive protection, travel risk management, and crisis coordination. The sector must prepare for a wider threat spectrum that includes terrorism risk, lone actor violence, politically motivated protest, labour unrest, organised crime, cyber-physical disruption, theft of strategic materials, fuel theft, and misinformation-driven mobilisation. The key requirement is not simply more guards or more cameras, but integrated intelligence-led security that connects geopolitical monitoring with local operational readiness. The financial sector will be affected through currency volatility, inflation expectations, interest rate uncertainty, credit risk, insurance repricing, sanctions compliance, cyber risk, and market sentiment. A weaker rand increases import costs and may add inflationary pressure. Higher interest rates or delayed rate cuts weaken household balance sheets and increase default risk. Banks and insurers may face rising claims linked to unrest, business interruption, cyber incidents, cargo disruption, and political violence. Asset managers may see portfolio rotation into safe haven assets, defense, energy, gold, and critical minerals, while consumer lenders and retailers face pressure from declining disposable income. Financial institutions must also pay close attention to sanctions exposure, correspondent banking risk, illicit finance, terrorist financing, and reputational risk where clients, trade flows, or intermediaries touch sanctioned networks. The most important South African risk is the convergence of economic hardship and social mobilization. Fuel inflation affects taxi fares, food distribution, household budgets, school transport, worker mobility, and municipal service delivery. Food inflation affects low-income households immediately. Higher borrowing costs affect small businesses, homeowners, consumers, and municipal finances. If political actors frame these pressures as evidence of government failure, foreign manipulation, corporate profiteering, or elite indifference, mobilization can accelerate quickly. South Africa's history of protest politics means that economic grievance can rapidly become operational disruption for businesses, especially in transport corridors, retail nodes, industrial zones, campuses, municipal centres, and mining communities. The opportunity side must also be recognised. South Africa can benefit if it positions itself as a stable supplier of strategic minerals, gold, platinum group metals, agricultural expertise, security expertise, financial services, and regional logistics capacity. If global companies seek supply chain diversification away from the Middle East, Eastern Europe, or over-concentrated Asian routes, South Africa can attract selective investment into mining beneficiation, renewable energy, port upgrades, data centers, cybersecurity, food processing, and regional trade platforms. However, this opportunity depends on execution, energy security, rail and port reliability, policy certainty, crime control, regulatory efficiency, and credible public-private coordination. Without these, the opportunity will be lost to faster-moving competitors. The strategic conclusion is that the Iran conflict is not only a military or diplomatic crisis, it is a global economic stress test. It tests whether governments can contain inflation without killing growth, whether businesses can absorb higher input costs without destroying demand, whether societies can withstand cost of living pressure without mass mobilization, and whether security systems can manage a threat environment where terrorism, protest, cyber disruption, organized crime, and geopolitical propaganda increasingly overlap. For South Africa, the correct response is neither panic nor passive observation. It is early scenario planning, sector-specific resilience, disciplined communication, protection of critical infrastructure, financial stress testing, supply chain diversification, and close monitoring of social mobilization indicators. The conflict may be centered in the Middle East, but its consequences will be carried through fuel pumps, food prices, currencies, ports, insurance markets, boardrooms, streets, and security control rooms across the world. This is the end of part 6 and brings our topic to a close. If this briefing helped you read the signs a little earlier and see the road a little more clearly, give us a like and click the bell icon so that you are informed when we post new risk assessments, situational reports, and socio-economic or political reviews. If you want to find out how Threat Insight can assist your organization with real-time and credible risk intelligence to help you navigate the complexity of the present instability, please reach out to our business development team, who is eager to assist.